Music has always been an iconic part of video games. Not only have they defined worlds and characters that they're from, they've even become a pillar of the era they were released in. So, when it comes to incorporating music into your own games, well, you have a few options to choose from. You can either A. Search online for some royalty-free music, and hope to God they all notice you've been playing Kevin McClure's Far in the Realms on loop. B. Make your own original track from scratch and have it sound like the title theme to Adventures of Red Gravity and give everyone this to it. Or C. Just stick with some ambient noises. Done right, it can give your game a really interesting atmosphere, like in Limbo. But it might make it feel a bit empty and awkward. I mean, that's fine if that's your intention, but if not, then, well, Or you could pay a shit ton of cash in licensing fees to hire a professional musician to add one song into the game that can't be streamed or sold in any country, except for New Zealand, but only for about 5 years. Yeah, now that I think about it, the awkward silence isn't too awkward now, is it? Licensed music can have a pretty big impact in video games, whether it be giving the spotlight to a beloved band, turning a simple sports game into a time capsule of an entire generation, or just be the reason why a bunch of YouTube channels don't even exist anymore. So, how do we even get here, anyway? Well, before we start to talk about license agreements or what DMCA even is, let's take a look back at music's history in gaming. And when I say look back, I mean way back. Before the PS1, before the NES, hell, even before the first Godzilla movie came out. All the way back in 1951, the Francium Mark I computer was released, and was one of the first commercially available computers at the time. To make matches of checkers more interesting, a British computer scientist named Christopher Strachey wrote in a program that played God Save the Queen at the end of each game. Now, it may not have caught the attention of Bill Haley and his comics, but it is pretty crazy to look at a massive hunkering machinery like this and have it make sounds that isn't just buzzing or whirling noises. However, it won't be until the 1970s when gaming would start to catch on to the general public, when games like Gunfight and Pong started releasing into arcades and restaurants. Although the hardware for the audio itself was still pretty limited, so it couldn't really be used for short musical jingles and by the time we reached the 80s, not only were games like Galaga creating short musical stings that would get stuck in people's heads for decades, the whole genre itself was starting to explode, with everyone wanting a piece of that Pac-Man-shaped pizza, including a rock band you probably wouldn't expect to see here. In 1982, Data Age would partner up with Journey to make a game as an ad for their latest album Escape, with the app named Journey Escape. In it, you try to avoid managers and groupies, or at least that's what the instructions say that they are, as you try to reach the spaceship to finish the level. And yeah, there really wasn't much to the game itself. The only things that really connected the band itself are the group's names appearing at the top right of the screen, and the short cover of Don't Stop Believing that plays occasionally. Though it really wasn't enough to save the game from poor sales or reviews, and, well, bankruptcy. Despite this, Journey would go on to make the jump into arcades in the following year with the release of Journey. Just when life can get more confusing. In the game, you try to find the band's instruments by bouncing on top of drums like trampolines, blasting away projectiles with a microphone, and even riding a jetpack while carrying an electric guitar. Just in case you were starting to forget when this game was made.
Is this the AT?
Probably one of the strangest aspects of this game is the fact that it uses actual photos from the group's faces. In a bizarre way, it actually makes it look like an old Flash game from Newgrounds. As I was writing the script for this, I actually had to check and see if the cabinet actually existed, and it wasn't just some weird ROM someone uploaded online, and yep, it certainly exists. Funnily enough, the tech used for the faces was apparently going to be used for a completely different game, Then we've taken photos of the players' faces for the high scores. But when they're doing location tests, people would take. Oh, they would- well, moving on from that, the machine plays 6 custom arrangements from Escape, as well as a short rip of Separate Ways that plays in the last level of the game, from a cassette deck from within the cabinet. The sound quality is honestly pretty good, despite clashing with the rest of the 8-bit arrangements, though I don't really think adding really makes it the definitive version of the song now, does it? Afterwards, gaming started taking a pretty big shift here in the West. The arcades have been doing their right, the home consoles themselves haven't been doing so well. And by not doing so well, I mean the entire market crashed. Game companies became super greedy and started releasing crappy and often unfinished games, and then just slapping popular brands onto them just to make a quick buck. Games like Star Wars, Spider-Man, hell, even Texas Chainsaw Massacre of all things. Because of that, people just got fed up and stopped buying them, and the whole industry basically just died out. Until 2 years later, when a Japanese toy company would bring their console overseas. An entertainment system, if you will. The Nintendo Entertainment System was released in 1985, and even though it was initially sold as a toy you could play with your TV, it would completely revitalize the entire genre with fun and intuitive games, and graphics that actually resemble things that aren't just random blocks come together. Is that a loaf of bread or is that a Twinkie? Oh, it's a log. Okay, we'll just roll with that. With the console selling out in stores that could play music without needing to tape out the cassette player onto it, of course everyone tried jumping into the fray with their own games. Though, thankfully with the intro of the Nintendo seal of approval, games need to be authorized by Nintendo directly before they can be sold onto their console. Don't necessarily mean the games had to be, well, fun. They weren't released playable, for the most part. So when it came to music, a lot of devs would just opt for original compositions with maybe a leitmotif from the movie or show it's based on. Not sure if it's because of limited sound quality that might have turned composers off, or they're just unsure if gaming was a viable business again. Regardless, there aren't that many games based on a specific band like with Journey. Except for the Wild Stallions. Anyways, that will change with the release of the Sega Genesis. Or Mega Drive if you're just weird. If the 16-bit graphics, stereo sound, and blast processing didn't catch your attention, the commercials definitely did. Not only showing off the console's features in games, but as well as having the balls to say if you own the NES, you're just an idiot. With the system's iconic tagline, "What Nintendo don't." Besides releasing home parts of arcade games, they also did a bunch of licensed games with celebrities, like with Joe Montana Football, Pat Riley Basketball, and, most notably, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. A 2D beat-em-up based on the movie, aside from a few tracks, the music itself actually comes from a bunch of Jackson's previous albums, like with Beat It, Bad, and Billie Jean. Though it is a bit weird that Thriller isn't included, even though there is a graveyard level with dancing zombies in it. What's even weirder is that apparently there are earlier versions of the game with the song included, but they're super rare and hard to find, or at least affordably. Interestingly, Michael Jackson actually was a producer on the game, and will even later go on to work on the music for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. However, he wouldn't include his name in the credits. Allegedly, this was due to him being dissatisfied with the game's compression. But he was fine with including his name in Moonwalker, so... Moving on, more and more bands would start jumping into the industry with games like Xenon 2 having bombed the base by Mega Blast on the title screen, and Aerosmith being featured in their own game in the arcades.
Remember, music is a weapon. Whoa!
As we move later on through the 90s, one addition that drastically changed music and gaming is the addition of the compact disc, or CDs. They...
Got him! Got him!
well, Sorry. What are we talking about again? Oh yeah, Sonic stuff. Not only did they allow more data to be stored at a cheaper price, they also provided better sound quality, with them being the same format that a lot of artists have been using at that time. Some of these consoles could even double as CD players, so it was kind of a match made in heaven for these two industries. Sega themselves tried experimenting with CDs with the Sega CD add-on for the Genesis, and though games like Sonic CD did do a good job of demonstrating the capabilities of its sound quality, it just didn't catch on. And the fact it was attachment to an already aging system didn't really help its case either. Coincidentally, Nintendo was also working on a CD attachment for the Super Nintendo with another company. Heck, they even made a prototype for it, but during contract disputes between the two, Nintendo backed out without warning and partnered with Philips to make the Philips CDI, aka the source of all those YouTube poop videos that flooded the internet.
You want it? It's yours, my
God, remember those? Because I sure as hell do. The Philips CDI was it was terrible. It was basically just a glorified DVD player that got retrofitted into a game console that, well, ended up failing at both. As for the first company that got left out and the prototype they built, well, they decided to keep what they worked on and start building their own console. Though the design was different, they did keep the name. Now we're entering the Sony PlayStation, and well, this is where things start to get pretty crazy. Not only was this the era with Rob Zombie music being in Twisted Metal 3, even with him becoming playable in 4, it was also the generation that dropped Wipeout, which had 12 songs from 12 completely different bands, like The Prodigy and New Order. It was also the same era when Dance Dance Revolution made its debut. Not only was it a smash hit in the arcades, it became a cultural touchstone of the entire era that would explode with numerous different versions with countless tracks and musical groups, all chosen with the sole intention of setting your feet on fire. And then Tony Hawk's Pro Skater happened, and man, it's one thing to have a soundtrack that completely defines a game, but to define the entire era of sports, it's just a whole nother level. If you're doing a kickflip and Superman by Goldfinger isn't playing in your head, then it's probably Guerrilla Radio by Rage Against the Machine, or just any other song from the franchise. And that attention didn't go unnoticed, especially with the next generation games with the Xbox, PS2, GameCube, and Dreamcast. Hold up. Okay, so we have Dance Dance Revolution, Crazy Taxi, GTA 3, Amped, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, Def Jam Vendetta, Burnout 3, Rovel. Hell, Black Eyed Peas did similar versions of their songs in the Arab Sims in the City. Right now, not only were you having rappers like Fred Durst just randomly show up in a bunch of games, the games themselves were basically becoming jukeboxes for the year they were made in, no longer being limited to just one band or group. Now, if you own an original Xbox, you can download any CD onto the system's hardware and add your own custom playlist to a bunch of games, which means that the song list could be as large and wide as the system could allow. Even if a game dev couldn't get the rights to a song, it didn't stop companies like Nintendo from adding covers of Skater Boy by Avril Lavigne, or YMCA by the Village People for Elite Beat Agents. Funny enough, this was the same approach that Harmonix did for the first two games of a completely new franchise that would later go on to catch the whole world's attention. And its name was Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero came out in 2005 and was heavily inspired by Konami's Guitar Freaks. Even though the song list was relatively small compared to later entries with only 47 tracks that mostly consisted of covers, its addictive gameplay and intuitive control made it a huge hit. After the game's sequel in 2006, Harmonix was then bought by MTV, so the third installment was handed over to Neversoft, who were actually the same devs behind Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. It's fine to have that Rob's back around. With new multiplayer modes, online play, releases on new hardware like the PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii, and 70 officially licensed tracks, it's no wonder the game became a huge success, but I don't think anyone was prepared to see how massive the game would become. It was the first game to reach $1 billion at the time, and it inspired countless people to become musicians themselves. And to put this in perspective, when Guitar Hero Aerosmith was released the following year, Aerosmith actually made more money off the game itself than every single album they have ever released. That's insane. Imagine if the most profitable thing in your entire long-running music career was a copy of Link's Crossbow Train with your name slapped onto it. I mean, if it's anything like the Tony Hawk series, then it shouldn't be too bad of a thought to sleep on, now would it? Though, I am kinda sad that Revolution X wasn't the one to do it. Shortly after Guitar Hero 3's release, Harmonix jumped back into the fray with their own series with Rock Band, and they both took off with numerous different versions, ports, and, of course, plastic guitars, as well as releasing a few spin-offs like DJ Hero and Lego Rock Band. In 2008, outside of the music game genre, Fallout 3 was a solid time capsule of 1940s and 50s rock and roll. Just Dance just debuted and let people dance to Katy Perry and the Gorillaz, and TV commercials like the reveal of Gears of War with Gary Jules' cover of Mad World were taking the globe by storm. So, licensed music was starting to become a pretty hit commodity, and games like Guitar Hero and Rock Band have even inspired other games like Rocksmith in 2011 and Bandfuse in 2012, and they were selling like crazy. Maybe a little too crazy. Remember back when I was talking about the oversaturation of crappy games that led to the video game crash in the 80s? Well, that kinda happens with music games. So Guitar Hero and Rock Band were so fun to play with your friends and family, box sets were becoming more and more expensive, and started overflowing the retail stores with huge boxes of copycats and variants, each of them fighting each other for space. By 2009, sales started going down by half, and by 2010, the bubble had burst. Harmonix had been sold off with no plans of a new entry, and the entire Guitar Hero series was just completely cancelled. Aside from a few attempted revivals like with Rock Band 4 and Guitar Hero Live in 2015, neither of them really could recapture the same energy the previous titles had, and we haven't got a new game from either of them since.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Even though the era of Rock Bands and Guitar Heroes long since passed, licensed music still keeps showing up today. Superman by Goldfinger made a comeback in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 in 2020, with the addition of some newer tracks like My Bloody Valentine by Machine Gun Kelly and Let's Do It by Alta. Just Dance and the 2K WWE games are still using just fine, and Fortnite even added their own Guitar Hero game mode straight from Harmonix themselves. Heck, they even have entire concerts with Marshmello and Eminem, and Travis Scott, and Peter Griffin. However, a lot of games nowadays aren't really using them, and just opt for creating their own tracks. Even re-releases of older games like Sonic Origins have completely replaced the music for Sonic 3 Knuckles with covers of the beta music. And Burnout Paradise and the GTA trilogy just have a bunch of their songs just straight up missing. Or, at least, that's what they want you to think. So, what's going on? Well, to find that out, we are finally going to travel through the wonderful world of license agreements and regulations. Yay! Now, throughout this video, I said the word license 8 times so far, and yet I haven't actually broken down what a license really is. Well, a license is basically a written document or object that says you're allowed to do a specific thing, whether it be driving, even medical advice, or even just killing people. Now for music, things can get pretty complicated. Chris Cook, the co-founder and MD of the Complete Music Update, or CMU, a London-based company designed to help educate people of the music industry, has himself stated that the reason for this is for a variety of factors. First off, songs and the recordings need separate rights for each of them. You can't just drop an MP3 of Man Who Served the World into MGS5. You're also going to need the audio recordings of Midge Ure performing the song as well. So, basically, you already have to pay at least twice just for one song. Second, the copyrights for songs can, and probably will, be owned by different companies and parties. In Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the game's director, Masahiro Sakurai, actually did brought this up when they're adding Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII into the game. He couldn't just call Nobumatsu on the phone and get the original tracks. Even though he did compose the music for the original game, the rights to the songs are also shared by Square Enix themselves, as well as Sony Computer Entertainment, who also have their own record company with Sony Music Entertainment Japan, who are also owned by a completely different company called King Records, not to be confused with the US record company of the same name, and... yeah, you can see how complicated this can be with even something as simple as adding the guest character to a Nintendo game. Now, you might get lucky like he did with SNK when they added Terry Bogard from Fatal Fury, where they can just dump all the songs onto it with a huge thumbs up from them. But more often than not, it can just be a convoluted mess of factors, with different companies having specific rights to specific versions of songs bouncing all over the place, with an entire sense of people having their own opinions of how Snoop Dogg track should be used in Tekken Tag 2. We're only halfway through, by the way. It's only gonna get worse from here. The third thing to keep in mind is that if you put a song onto the internet, technically, you're making a copy of that track, so that needs to be licensed separately. If you upload a Sonic AMV with Numb by Linkin Park onto YouTube, or just use it as background music for your streams, well, in a way, you're actually releasing another version of that song. Some companies and artists are still pretty chill with how their music is being used online, but most of the time, if Bruno Mars is playing on your neighbor's radio for more than 5 seconds in your video, you're gonna get nuked off the face of the planet. Now that I think about it, games like Hi-Fi Rush and Cyberpunk 2077 have options in the settings literally called Streamer Mode that removes all copyrighted songs from the game. Well, most of them, anyway. Well, it does make you wonder if that's a factor for adding banned songs to their games. In case all of that wasn't complicated enough, all these rules change depending on the people, companies, hell, even countries they're from. Just because a song is popular in one country, it doesn't mean it will be popular in another. Some games, like Sonic CD and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, have versions with completely different soundtracks depending on the region. And Dragon Quest has even bounced between using MIDI and orchestral versions of their songs when being localized over to the West. So, if you finally get to release your game, there's still a chance you can get banned or removed just because the manager was a fan of Anthrax and Public Enemy. Or they just want to promote their own indie rock band that they're in. Yeah, you can see why a lot of devs would just opt to make their own music and try to avoid all of this shit. This was made way worse by the fact that Rock Band and Guitar Hero's constant bidding for tracks caused a lot of these licenses for these songs to become super expensive. The worst part is that because of how much of a cluster music rights can be and how distant both industries are already, most of these games just weren't really made with future-proofing in mind, with contracts typically lasting only a few years after the game's original release. So, a lot of these games just can't be re-released nowadays without a ton of negotiations and money. These issues actually caused Alan Wake to become delisted and couldn't be bought or sold digitally. The only way you could get it was through a physical copy of the 360 version, either at a local game store or online. Thankfully, this has been resolved, so now you can get on the Switch if you want. But as for games that are digital only and don't have the backing to have a sync dance number at the Game Awards, they're not as lucky, and they'll likely end up completely disappearing. There is a chance they could get re-released later down the road if they have enough support, and there's devs willing to go through hell to champion it, but that's not always going to be a guarantee for every single game. So, are licensed games just going to die out because of this? No way. Considering how huge gaming has become in the mainstream, and you now have musicians trying to make their own games, and consoles. For better or worse, I think licensed music is here to stay. Do video games need licensed music to be relevant or good? No, not really. Their own music has evolved so much over the years that they've not only won Grammys, they've created entirely new musical styles like chiptune. So, yeah, I think it was fine either way. You know, it's kind of funny now that I think about it. Some of my earliest memories as a kid were playing Sonic 2 Battle and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X. So I never really assumed there even was a difference between the music that I hear in the games I loved versus the songs I hear on the radio, or on TV for that matter. At the end of the day, it was all just music to me. Even today, if you were to play a random song and ask me if it was either from an up-and-coming rock group or if it was from a Sonic game, then, well, I'm kind of a freak when it comes to Sonic, so I would probably recognize it on the spot. It's not the Win by Crush Buddy from Sonic and Black Knight, by the way. But then again, if you've never played a Sonic game before, it would be pretty difficult for you to tell the difference, and honestly, I don't inherently think that's a bad thing. With a medium that's so diverse and versatile as music, it can literally show up anywhere. from surfing through playlists on Spotify, or just by hearing someone humming to themselves at a bus stop. So, if you get upset that my first exposure to Daydream Believer was fucking me music, honestly, I think you should chill a little bit. I think the question of where'd you first hear it shouldn't be more important than what do you think of it, or who wrote this. But it is fun when you get an earworm that'll get stuck in your head, or rediscovering a band you used to love, or even find a song that just really inspires you, either emotionally or even creatively. And if a snowboarding game from 2003 can do that for you, then I don't really see how you can complain about it. Unless it destroys your job because of it, but that's pretty unlikely. Then again, I did just spend an entire video talking about copyrighted material. I mean, it should be fine. Okay, fair enough.